Hi everyone, welcome. So I wanted to share with you guys a practice that I've been doing a lot lately. This is particularly great for anyone who runs a lot, anyone who cycles or spins a lot, or even does a lot of weightlifting or body weight sort of HIIT interval work. Essentially things that tighten this front side of the body and our hips and our glutes, our deeper hip muscles. And some of you guys know that I have an athletic background as a competitive alpine ski racer and a soccer player, and so a lot of my musculature and strength is in my legs and my glutes and my hips. And so because of doing that for so many years, these tend to be areas, my hip flexors, specifically psoas, sort of front of the thighs, quadricep muscles, and my hip muscles, right? My outer and deeper layer hip muscles just have always been something that I've had to really consciously work on to keep space and length in those areas, because I've still kept them really strong, but creating space and length is equally as important. So whether the kind of physical activity you do tends to strengthen and tighten those particular areas, or if you just know that you are tight in these areas, this is a great practice for you. So we're going to work on opening up the hip flexors, the psoas muscle, which is a really, really deep hip flexor, and also just a stabilizer muscle, essentially, that tends to be really tight. Some people don't know that it necessarily is, and it can show up in different ways. It can show up as low back pain. It can show up in even our digestive system, because the front part of the psoas is a really deep muscle. It essentially goes from your T12, so that vertebra that's the bottom of your thoracic spine, rib cage, and it runs really deep. Kind of, if I had like something to put all the way in, it basically goes way down along the front side of the transverse processes of the spine, all the way down into the pelvic bowl, and then it attaches like way up in your upper inner thigh, like in the groin area. So it's really long, it's really strong, and it tends to be tight, and it can be hard to access. And then obviously, you guys, those of you that know that the glute and the hip muscles, there's a lot of layers in there. So to start to be able to layer and sift through those layers are really good tools to have. And a lot of times too, if you think about running and cycling, it just often we get both of the front side, but the back side of the legs also seem to be tight. So I want to run through a few of my favorite exercises and yoga poses that just, again, helps to create some length and space in these particular areas. So if you can have 2 blocks, a rolled up yoga mat, you can use a towel if that works as well. Really anything that can kind of be a little bit squishy but has some stability. So rolled up yoga mat is one of my favorites. All right, so you're going to start on all fours. Just kind of land there. We're not going to be here for too long, but just bring your hands outer shoulder width apart, root down through your finger pads, tuck your toes under. We're going to just start in a really gentle downward facing dog. So you're going to lift the hips, lift the knees, and just kind of find your way there. Now, if you tend to have tightness in the backs of the legs, usually just downward facing dog is a pretty good stretch. If you have a lot of tension in the hamstrings and the low back, I always suggest bending the knees so you can access a little bit more of the lumbar curve in the low back, okay? So just come here for a moment, bend the knees, the heels actually lift up off the floor for a moment, soften the facial muscles, and just take a few moments to breathe. Right, one of the biggest gifts we can give ourselves is just landing in our own body. Just becoming present with the sensations, the feelings, the tension, the joy, the entire experience of being in our bodies. So go ahead and start to pedal the feet out. So as you lift one heel, bend the knee, you might start to feel that in the calf muscles. Now there's a couple different layers in the calf muscles. We have the more superficial layer, it's the gastrocnemius muscles, there's two bellies to that. And that's usually the one that we tend to stretch most often. There's a much deeper calf muscle called the soleus that's harder to get to, but really important, especially in runners and cyclists. Really important to stretch. So what I want you to do here is come into kind of your typical downward facing dog with your heels rooted down on the ground, legs straight-ish. If they need to bend a little bit, please do that. But what we're going to do here is think about trying to keep your heels rooted into the floor and then bend the knees, but don't let the heels lift up off the ground. They can lift a little bit, they can get light, but try to keep the heels grounded. Bend the knees, keep your knees as wide as your ankles. So here we're starting to, when we bend the knee, we take the stretch out of those more superficial gastrocnemius muscles and we shift the stretch into the soleus muscle. So take a couple breaths. Again, bent knees, but heels root down towards the ground. And if you think about lifting your sits bones up as high as you can, like that will even increase the stretch there. Good, bring the knees down. And pause. Okay, so from here, you're gonna step the right leg forward, left leg back. So you're in a low lunge. If you need padding underneath your knee, please put it there. You're gonna have your blocks in front of you. We're not gonna get to them quite yet, but just have them available. So from here, you're gonna bring your hands down to the ground. Walk your right foot wide so that it's about as wide as your mat. So the pinky toe edge of your foot is right up against the mat. Now here, we're gonna just start to move and shift into the outer hip muscles and the deeper hip muscles. So if being on fingertips or with your palms down still feels like too much, grab your blocks. And there are 3 different settings. So just allow yourself to pause here, push into your front heel in particular. So what that's going to do is that's actually going to activate your hip muscles, your outer hip muscles, and stretch them at the same time. And then push down into the back 5 toes. So you're really rooting strongly through the feet. Okay? Now again, if you're not feeling this in your hip and you're up on blocks in your front hip, just move the blocks away and just come down onto your hands. So this is a great practice to do post run or post spin or cycle, or post lifting, or if you just need some space in your legs and your hips. Take one more full breath in here. Full breath out. Good, and then you're going to bring that right foot back, coming to all fours. Now you can transition through this through downward facing dog or even through Uttanasana. I'm just doing it through all fours right now to make it as accessible as possible. So left leg forward, walk your left foot over to the edge of your mat. Keep the back toes tucked under. Now again, fingertips, palms, or come up on blocks. That's the choose your own adventure moment. Root down into your front heel, so you're both activating and opening this outer hip. Push down into your back toes, all 5 of them, even the pinky toe. So you're really connected through the legs, and keep your facial muscles soft, spine nice and long. And breathe. Back foot, left foot back. Come to all fours or downward facing dog. Again, either way. Step the right foot forward. This time you're going to take a block. You're going to place your block on its highest setting just to the outside of the right ankle. You're going to come up with the right hand on that block. Now you're going to untuck your back toes. Okay? So it's kind of interesting how the way that your back foot is placed, you will feel it differently in your hip flexors of the back leg. So when I'm really trying to open my hip flexors, and particularly my psoas, I like to untuck my back toes and push the top of my foot into the floor. That is very, very key. So as your right hand anchors onto the block, really activate that back foot into the ground. Inhale, stretch your left arm forward. And as you exhale, you're just gently going to crescent over to the right. So again, your torso's at about 45-degree angle. So you're getting long, all the way from the left knee up through the left thigh, hip flexor, side body, rib cage. This really, really helps to target the psoas muscle. Stay plugged into that back foot. Inhale, come up. You're going to stay up with your torso. Now you're going to take your block, you're going to bring it back so that it's just about in line with your hip, your right hip. So the torso is a little bit more vertical now. Left hand comes to left hip. Stay connected to that back foot. Push it down. That will keep your legs strong, but create more length. Now inhale the left arm up here. Exhale, crescent to the right. So you're still just gently crescenting, but stay connected through the left foot. Opening up the whole left hip flexors, psoas, side body. So the right arm here is really just lightly on that block on the right side, and the elbow is bent. But this is not so much about bending over to the right as it is more lengthening up and then gently crescenting. Inhale, come back up. Bring the left hand down, move the block forward. And then here, you can shift the weight back a little bit, bring the right leg back. Just switch legs. So left foot comes forward. Sometimes it's the coming out of that can feel the hardest, especially if you're feeling a little stuck and stiff. Okay, so once again, the block comes right to the outside of your left ankle. Right toes untuck, push the back of the foot down. You can even peek back, make sure that your toes are pointing straight back so you're not sickling the ankle. Now from here, left hand on the block, right hand to right hip, so the torso is coming up just a little bit, about 45 degrees. And stretch the right arm forward. Take a big breath in as you anchor down through the top of that right foot, and exhale, crescent to the left. The more you push to the top of the right foot, the more you will both engage and open the front of the leg. Good. Inhale, come up. Bring the right hand on the hip. Now bring your block, bring it back. Keep it on the high setting. Keep it now in line with that outer left hip. Stay connected to both feet, especially that back foot. Inhale the right arm up. Exhale, crescent to the left. So again, it's more about lifting and lengthening and slight crescent. The left hand on the block is pretty light. Elbow is bent. Breathe space into your body. Inhale, back up to center. Bring the hand down. Move your block out of the way. Good. And then bring that left foot back. Okay, so now you're going to grab your rolled mat. Okay, so this helps to open both the calf and the hamstrings. I love this. It's kind of, it's a little bit of tough love. What you're going to do is you're going to take your rolled up mat and you're going to keep your toes untucked. Now, if you have sensitive ankles or knees, you can always put a blanket underneath your ankles or your knees. Otherwise, you're gonna want to lean way forward, so you're really opening up the back of the knee joint. You're gonna take that rolled up mat, try to get it as far into that crook of the knee as you can, and then you're going to sit back and cozy in for a moment. So what I love about this as well is for some people that have a really hard time deeply flexing, so this right now, my knee is in flexion. So people who struggle with deep flexion of the knee, this is a great way to flex the knee while you're creating space, because you have a mat between your thighs and your shins. And so it allows space for the knee joint to flex safely, while it also, when we come out of this, it also creates this whole new flush of blood, so circulation to the area. So you can just sort of hang here. If you want to make it a little extra juicy, you can rock from one side and then to the other. You'll know, your body will talk to you. Listen to it. Then you're gonna roll back half an inch. Sit on back down. So for me, it's always the very top of my calf muscles. And then further down by the Achilles. Those are the sweet spots for me. And again, you can find stillness and use your breath. If you're feeling discomfort, breathe into that discomfort. If you're feeling pain, back off. Discomfort, that's where the magic happens. Roll back a few inches. No, not a few inches, a half an inch. It's a good time to sing a song, tell a story. Roll back one more time, all the way to the Achilles. Good, and then release. Move that aside. I always love to do a downward facing dog right after I do this, just to bring that blood back into the back of the legs. And then often you'll notice, you're like, wow, there's a whole lot more space back there. It's a beautiful thing. So just take 3 breaths here. Good, and then bring the knees down. Okay, a couple more exercises. These are going to be on your back. So come onto your back, have your blocks to your back. You're going to take one block first to start. These 2 exercises are phenomenal, and I actually cannot take credit for them. My friend and colleague, Mike Torrent, who's an amazing yoga teacher and massage therapist, showed me these, and I do them all the time. So you're going to come onto your back with your knees bent, and then you're going to take your block on its lowest setting, and you're going to place it right underneath your sacrum and let your pelvis rest on it. Now it should feel, when it's in the right spot, it should feel really stable and solid, okay? So what you're going to do here is you're going to take your right leg and you're going to start to walk your right foot in towards the left and kind of tuck it behind that back heel. You can even grab your foot with your left hand and sort of pull it towards the left hip and then let it come down. This is great for the psoas and sometimes your upper or your the top of your thigh, your quad. Now, if the leg feels really far off the ground, you can place a block under there. So I'm going to do it in this direction as well so you guys can see. Okay, so I would have another block nearby for this reason. Okay, so when you walk that right foot over to the right, and then you can grab it with the left hand just to help kind of pull it in. Then you let that right knee rest on the floor. Okay, if the leg is really high, grab a block and place it under the leg. You might feel the top of the thigh, the psoas, even into the belly start to open. Okay, so just have some options available Now from here, where I tend to really feel this is in the top of my quad, and then literally into the low belly, because again, the psoas moves. I'm just gonna rotate back. I wish I had like a lazy Susan. So I really feel it in this area. And what can also be kind of delicious is if you take your right arm way up high and think about anchoring the right thigh down to the floor and stretching the right arm up and overhead. You get to kind of extend yourself in two directions. And by having the pelvis up on a block, you're creating almost a little arch of the psoas, so it really helps to lengthen the front side of the psoas. That's the side that tends to get very contracted. So you can bring the right arm back down. Start to lift the right knee as you place the right foot now down. We move on to the second side. So again, one side might be completely different than the other. But you're going to start to walk that left foot over to the right. You're going to tuck kind of behind that ankle, the right ankle. And again, you can use your hand to pull on the foot and bring the heel towards that right hip. And then let that knee come down towards the floor. If it's really high, prop that block underneath there, okay? Don't be a hero. Just pay attention, be mindful. So for me, this side is much tighter. Even though I'm right side dominant, my left side of my body is my anchoring side. So I just tend to be a little more contracted in the left side, particularly in the left hip flexors and the left hip. And breathe. And again, you can stretch the left arm up. And if the left arm stretches up, root down through the left thigh, down towards the floor more as you stretch the left arm up. And you'll start to feel, obviously the longer you spend, the more you're going to feel an opening and a lengthening, or the more consistently you do this, right? The more consistently we do anything, we start to feel the effects. So lift that left knee up, bring the foot down to the ground, go ahead and lift your hips gently, move the block out of the way. Okay, so from here you're going to come up for a moment, just be mindful. You're going to grab both blocks. Now, what you're going to do is you're going to put your blocks on your mat so they're at an angle like this, okay? So where your head is, the top of the blocks are going to move out. And you're going to kind of create, and you'll change them as you need to, about, between 6 and 8 inches between the blocks. They're at this 45-degree angle, okay? So the blocks are basically going to be like this. And you guys, the corner of the blocks are going to go into your hip muscles, and we're going to move them around to start to kind of access some trigger points and some dense areas in the hips. This doesn't necessarily feel lovely, but it is very effective. It's essentially a self-massage technique. It's like a self-deep tissue technique for your hips, okay? But we want to do it symmetrically. So I'm going to set them up. Then I will find my way. I'm going to lift my hips up, then I'm going to move the blocks inward, and I want them to be symmetrical, okay? So there's not particularly a right place. Right now, I have the edges of the blocks right to the outsides of the top of my sacrum, that triangular bone at the base of our spine, okay? There's a lot of muscles here, a lot of trigger points for me. And I have cork blocks, which are a little intense, but good. If you have foam blocks, they'll be a slightly more forgiving, but this is intense. Okay, so what I want to encourage you to do is let your pelvis be very weighty and very heavy, and stay with your breath. You might find you're trying to like lift your pelvis off the blocks and fight this. Try not to fight it, try to be with it, okay? The more you can let the pelvis rest, so it's almost like the blocks have created a little nest. So they're what's holding my pelvis up. My hips, my pelvis are not touching the floor. You just keep the knees bent, and you'll notice if you kind of move the knees around a little bit, it makes it a little more interesting. So you'll stay in one place for a few breaths. Very intense. And then you get to kind of play around with it. So once you feel like you've had enough in one area, maybe you move the blocks a little further to the outside, coming more to the outer hip. Again, let the pelvis be heavy, let the breath be full. So here my pelvis is almost touching the ground. There's a little more space between the blocks. We might stay here for a few breaths. So if any of you have done any work with balls, like tennis balls or the harder balls, even like a lacrosse ball is really great. I have some roller balls. It's a very similar exercise to that, you know, where you're putting the ball in a certain area in your hip, and you're rolling on it or against the wall or on the floor. This is a very similar concept. You're just using a corner of a block. Okay, so I'm going to lift my pelvis. Now I'm going to bring the blocks now further down and a little bit closer together, kind of actually getting a little bit more towards like the piriformis muscle part of it, the top of it. Oh boy. So you'll find the sweet spots. You'll find the juicy spots where you know that it's getting in, and you might be a little bit sore. Like I did this last night, and I woke up this morning. I was like, oh yeah, I can feel that. And that's similar. Like if you've ever had a, neuromuscular massage work done, trigger point therapy, deep tissue, you can feel sore because it's starting to open the layers and reshift the muscle fibers in your muscles so they can breathe again, so they can function properly, so they can get blood flow back into that area, so that it starts to lose that feeling of hypertonicity. Okay, I'm just going to do one more here with you guys. And again, you can stay here as long as you want. You can play with this as long as you want. You may want to jump out of this. You might want to resist this as much as possible, but I encourage you to just hang here. And then once you feel like you've had enough, you just lift the hips up, move the blocks out of the way, let your pelvis come all the way down, extend the legs out. You can bring your hands on your belly and just take a couple conscious belly breaths. Just become really attuned to the sensations in your body, to what shifted from the beginning of this practice to now. What information did your body give you? You can draw knees into belly, roll to your side, support yourself all the way up. There we go. Thank you guys so much. I hope you enjoyed that practice again. If it's something great to do after a workout, it's a great shorter practice to do if you have, 20, 30 minutes in your day. Also just great if you're feeling constricted, right? In your legs and your hips. This is something that's great to come to as much as you can. So hope you enjoy that, and have a beautiful day.